Just want to remind you guys, this episode is presented by Prize Picks. Download the app today. Use the code JUICE to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. What is going on, Colts Nation? Welcome back to another episode of Bring the Juice. You have your guys, of course, Cody and Derek, back for another one, guys. And today we are going to discuss Indianapolis Colts positions of need, if the Colts should address them in a long-term sort of way or a short-term sort of way, or you could look at it as free agency versus the draft. So with that being said, Derek, let's jump right into this. So we'll start with the position that I know has been a lot of conversations that have been around this position. That, of course, is the quarterback position. And obviously the Indianapolis Colts have Anthony Richardson, who they drafted number 4 overall back in 2023. But there are a lot of question marks about AR's future with the Colts. And, Chris Ballard has talked about it. The idea of adding some real competition in there to push AR to be the best quarterback and the best player he can be. And even still, there is a lot of concerns and questions about the future of that position. But when it comes to the Colts and how they might address it this offseason, do we believe this is a move the Colts need to make short-term or long-term, and why?
Yeah, so for quarterback specifically, it would probably most likely be a short-term solution. And I think the ultimate one of the biggest reasons why you have it as a short-term, mainly just because right now you're not confident that even if there was a quarterback that we could get right now, either in this upcoming draft class or in free agency, that would put you in a position where you say that's the long-term solution. I really don't think there is one. And because we don't even know what quarterbacks are going to get taken in the first round of this draft at all. Like, we know the first 2, but we don't even know if those guys are going to get taken 1 or 2. We don't know. So it's kind of in a weird situation where there's just not a lot of great quarterbacks that are outside of their rookie deals right now. Even if the really good ones, they're under contract and it's not going to happen unless you trade. And I don't think the Colts are going to trade for something right now, because ultimately, again, coming down with Anthony Richardson, the Indianapolis Colts need him to do well, or else, Chris Ballard is probably on the chopping block. So again, you want to find that competition. You want to try to find a solution to that quarterback problem. But, again, ultimately the quarterback problem is going to have to start and end with Anthony Richardson. If not, then there's nothing else to really look forward to. So I'd say that's probably why it's more short term than anything.
Yeah, and I think you can't afford, if you're truly trying to push AR, you can't afford to go draft a guy in the mid rounds. I just don't think it makes a lot of sense for you to do with where you currently stand with AR, right? I think you need to bring in a real guy that's going to provide a real competition for Richardson to make him better, not in 2027. Right now, you need to bring in a guy that's going to do that, right? Not a guy that you're going to have to wait to develop. No, you need a guy that's been, he's not like a top 20 quarterback in the NFL. I mean, maybe he is, but I don't think there's a lot of those guys out there. I think you bring in a guy that truly could push him and make him better in training camp and make him better, in the offseason, and do those things to really push him and let him know, man, you're not just going to get handed the keys to the franchise anymore. Like, you got to go out there and earn it. And also you got to stay healthy as well, because if not, I mean, it's very clear, your GM has said it, you have not proven that you can stay healthy, right? So getting a true guy in there, I think that can push him in the short term would make a lot of sense for me, because at the end of the day, Derek, whoever you do bring in, I mean, you're going to get an answer one way or another if Anthony Richardson is your guy. And I know a lot of people are saying he is not the guy. I totally understand why people are saying that. But if there is like this is it for these guys, Anthony Richardson, Chris Ballard, Shane Steichen, all these guys, really, I think it really does hinge on who you bring in for competition and if AR can respond well to that competition and drastically improve his game from where it was in 2024. So, yeah, let's move on now. That was a good one, quarterback short term, but let's move on now to another position on offense. Now, this is one that's interesting, Derek, because it's not technically a starting position as well, but it is a position that I think will see the field a good amount, and that is RB2. That is the other running back that the Colts should bring in our opinion. I think it's definitely one of the top needs on offense, but a position that is very much needed to help Jonathan Taylor. And we've seen how different, teams are able to really have these two running back systems and have it be very, very effective. So when it comes to the running back position, how would you address this if you're the Indianapolis Colts?
Yeah, so we're running back. This is an interesting one because a lot of people will look at it and say, "Oh, you already have your starter, so what's the issue? Why do you need a long-term solution?" I say it's long-term for a couple reasons, and I think the big one is, for one, this running back has had injury problems in the past, and that is going to be a situation where that running back is going to have to fill some time. Secondly, is when Jonathan Taylor's new contract extension is up, which I believe, if I'm not mistaken, still has 2 more years. When that's up and Jonathan Taylor is approaching the brink of 30 years old, is Chris Ballard going to want to pay Jonathan Taylor a brand new big contract, which, could rival some of the biggest contracts that we've seen in NFL history? I mean, it's that's a conversation that's probably going to happen. And especially if Jonathan Taylor continues to put up the numbers that he does, right? Even in the games that he misses, Cody, we've seen it in the 12 games that Jonathan Taylor played this year. He still got over 1,300 yards, so that's just showing you again the impact that he can have. So if for some reason the Colts don't go in that direction with Jonathan Taylor, running back that's going to be in there that can take over the reins after that. So I know you can kind of apply both of these to quarterback and running back with the arguments that I just mentioned. The only difference is that it's all up to Anthony Richardson on whether or not he's going to be the short-term and long-term solution. It's really just going to be on the team whether or not Jonathan Taylor is the long-term solution or not. So that's why I would put the running back as a long-term option.
And they're so uniquely different as well, because running back, it is in a lot of ways, you do see that by committee approach, right? You see multiple guys getting handoffs. And also, what you're talking about, Jonathan Taylor, he's not old yet, but in a couple of years, he's going to be approaching 30. And as much as possible, you want to be able to take some of that load off his shoulders now, right? You want a guy that can come in immediately and take some of that off of him. And I do think, Derek, part of the reason why he's missed some games is because you've over-relied on him, because you really haven't had a lot of good options behind him. You had Zach Moss back in 2023. That was helpful. But, that type of approach where, yeah, of course, JT is always going to be your, bell cow lead back. But you need more guys in there that are really going, I think, to help take the load off of him, help on third downs, in pass protection, things that he's not that great at, things that he has struggled in his career. Got a guy that can catch it out of the backfield, but also on the short term, helping JT stay healthy in the regular season and also in the seasons to come as he approaches 30. I think that's definitely important because, Derek, he had a lot of carries at Wisconsin. He's had a lot of carries at the NFL level. And again, as good as Jonathan Taylor is, he has missed some time the last number of years. That's just a fact. So you need another running back in there that can come in and still play effective football for you, because outside of really Zach Moss, Derek, and you kind of got lucky with that one, the Colts really haven't had another back that could take on the load when JT is out and actually provide some quality, games. They just really haven't. The carries haven't been great outside of Zach Moss. So I do think you need another situation like that for the Indianapolis Colts, where you bring in a guy that, yes, can help you in the immediate when it comes to third down, things like that, but also can take the load off of JT a little bit, where now you can afford to, have him stay more healthy because you have actual quality behind him.
Yep, 100%.
All right, let's move on to the final kind of weapon, if you will, the final skill position we want to talk about, and that is the tight end position. And Derek, I think this one out of any of them is probably the most cut and dry one for us in a lot of ways. And when talking about the tight end position, there are a lot of good tight ends in this year's draft, which I think leads us to say probably long term here when it comes to tight end, because Colts don't have a lot of guys right now on the roster that you could honestly rely in. And I think, Derek, honestly, if out of all these positions on offense, this is one that I could be okay with going both ways, where you could go in free agency and go in the draft, and I'd be perfectly happy with that. But what do you think about the tight end position?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of funny because you could argue this is, short and long term, but I mean, this is a position where, you need to be able to find that long term solution guy, because right now you don't have anyone. You have a bunch of young guys on this roster that doesn't seem like they have a lot of bright futures ahead of them. And you have a veteran in there that has already reached his peak. So it's kind of hard. You don't really have anyone that you can fully rely on to go out there at any given moment and be the difference maker for, everything. So it's one of those where it's like, this is 100% going to be a long-term solution, because you have to find that someone, and you have to find someone that's going to be around for a while, because whichever quarterback is going to be the future of this team, they're going to need a tight end to be able to pass the ball to. And currently you don't have one.
Yeah, like I think you said it right. The word difference maker. You don't have a difference maker at tight end right now currently on your roster. You have some role guys. That's about it when it comes to tight ends. You either have, guys that are really good at run blocking, like a Mo Alley Cox, or you have guys like Jelani Woods that can't stay healthy, right? You don't have a difference maker that is consistently on the field for you. You just don't. So, yeah, tight end, I think this is a position, Derek, on offense. If you're talking about any that needs a complete makeover, I do think this position would be that fits the bill. You just don't have any solution. I think almost every other position on your roster, Derek, you can say at least you have one guy that is young and has some sort of potential. You don't have that at all when it comes to tight end. Either they're young and haven't done anything, or they're old or role players. I mean, that's just kind of how it is. So, yeah, I mean, I think tight end has to be a major focus for the Colts. And I think there's a lot of good tight ends in this draft, not just the Tyler Warrens of the world. Like, there's other guys as well later on in rounds 2 and 3 that I think would also be, and even, mid first round, that I do think, Derek, would make some sense for Indy to go after. So this is one position I think the Colts need to really go all in on. Take the approach that we've seen some NFL teams do when it's very clear a position is deficient. They don't just address it once, but they go like 2 or 3 times. They majorly address it, and that is a big focus for them. For the sake of the Colts offense, tight end has to be that position. All right, let's move on to the last position on offense, and this one's kind of a weird one because it's in flux, and you addressed it a lot in the draft last year. You have a couple young pieces, but Derek, the offensive line is still very much a question mark, because you very well could be moving on from 2 of your veterans who have been here since 2018 or earlier in Ryan Kelly and Braden Smith, respectively. So, yeah, there's questions. And then obviously you drafted Tanner Bortolini, who filled in at center, played pretty well. And you drafted Matt Gonzalez, who filled in at right tackle for Braden Smith when he's dealing with whatever personal issue he is dealing with. And I thought, to their credit, I thought they played just fine. I thought they played well. And, going into year 2 now, I think they have an opportunity to become those full-time guys. But for depth purposes, Derek, what would you say for the Colts when it comes to the offensive line? How would you address it, short or long term?
Yeah, I definitely think that it's more of a short-term solution, because you don't need a career second guy on the offensive line, but you definitely need to fill that depth right now if you're the offensive line for the Indianapolis Colts. Like you said, we have the pieces in place to be able to fill any immediate gaps that come into play on this offensive line right now in regards to the veterans. But yeah, you do need to look for that depth behind it, whether that's in free agency or in the draft. You could probably do both. But, and even so, you got to wonder if Danny Pinter and Wesley French, those guys you already have some depth pieces there that, you feel pretty comfortable if they had to take a few reps here and there. So all in all, I feel like it's not super high on the list of priorities, but it's still something that needs to be addressed.
I think more for me, especially if Braden Smith, whatever happens, if he retires or, you move off from him and you save some money, I do think tackle for me, Derek, would be the biggest one you probably have to address. Because again, you said it. You have two guys at the center position behind Tanner Bortolini that have proven that they can play some pretty high quality ball as backups, right? If need to step in. And I think maybe, a guy that can play maybe tackle and guard would be nice. Like more of the, Swiss Army knife, Joe Haig type of guy would make a lot of sense. A guy that can do a little bit of both and fill in competently at both. That would make a lot of sense for the Colts. And again, we'll have to look at some of these guys who become available, but especially if you move off of both these guys, we know how hard it is to find that swing tackle, Derek, to find that third guy. It's extremely difficult. So I think you need to do that in some capacity and find a guy, because I don't know about you, but I don't have any faith that right now, after watching Blake Freeland for 2 years, he can be that guy. I do think you really need to address it here in the short term and get a veteran in there that can help you out in that department. So, yeah, I do agree. I think it has to be a short-term thing here because you have some guys. But also, Derek, going back to what we talked about as well, we reacted to the Ryan Kelly stuff. You can't just hand that position to, Tanner Bortolini, or you can't just hand that position to Matt Gonzalez. You need some real competition in there that can push them to be the best they can be. And if they aren't ready right away, a guy that can step in the short term and help out in that department, if indeed you move on from both these guys. So, yeah, I think that makes total sense there for the short term for the offensive line.
As we said, guys, today's episode is sponsored by Prize Picks. Now, what is Prize Picks? Prize Picks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. Instead of battling against thousands of other players across platforms, you're basically picking 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you're choosing more or less on those stat projections to be able to watch those winnings roll in. It's very easy. Do you guys want to play along at some of Prize Picks' favorite players like rapper Meek Mill and UFC fighter Sugar Sean O'Malley? Well, if you guys sign up today, you can find the community plays under the promos tab of the app to view the entries of some of the biggest names on the platform and be a part of that as well. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000 just like that with NBA, NHL, and college basketball entries today on Prize Picks, America's #1 fantasy sports app. Like a lot of other things, guys, they also offer injury insurance, so your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. So if someone exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, that player projection won't count against you and the rest of your entry stays live. So it's great bounce back for that one. What I love about the app as well, guys, is it's not just sports like NBA, NHL, football, and tennis, and baseball, and all these other things, but there's also a lot of others that go into it as well. If you like to place entries on video game situations like Call of Duty, CS2, Apex, if that's something that appeals to you, there's a wide variety of sports and video games and everything else that you can place entries on. And I love how expansive it is. Even just looking at the NBA, there's entries you can make with turnovers, with points. You can do combo deals, dunks, field goals attempted, all of these different things. So there's just so many different ways to make money off of these entries. Be sure to download the app today and use the code JUICE to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup.
Now, we have 3 positions on defense I want to highlight, Derek. And the first one is the linebacker position. I mean, obviously you have EJ Speed, who's going to be a free agent. Very much seems like he is not going to be back from kind of what we've seen and all the stuff with the new defensive coordinator. Just for me, it seems like the Colts are going to go in a different direction. Could be wrong on that, but that's kind of the vibes I get there. So when it comes to linebacker, you do have some guys that have played. You have obviously, the guy you drafted last year in Jalen Carwise, who excels as a coverage linebacker, former safety. It was his first time playing linebacker at any level. And then you have some other guys like Grant Stewart, Segun Alubi, who are more of those backup special teams guys. But it does seem like the Colts could potentially add some, veteran presence here potentially. But also, Derek, at the same time, the Colts have had a pretty good history of drafting linebackers. So what would you do here if talking about the linebacker position, more of that guy to pair alongside Zaire Franklin, maybe more of a coverage type of linebacker that can help you out in that department?
Yeah, so the linebacker room is definitely a tricky one because you're right. We don't know whether or not EJ Speed's coming back with this team. You have Zaire Franklin on an extension. And I think the only reason this is short term is because you feel confident in the depth that you have. Carlisle, you have Stewart, and then you have a few others that have had times where they've, had to step in and provide valuable minutes. But you do want to try to find that other really good linebacker that can be good in coverage and also, just quite frankly, Cody just actually gives more of an effort, and that's kind of the situation that we're in right now. So, yeah, it definitely would be nice to see the Colts, attack that in free agency. Now, I will say this, I could see them going for a linebacker in the draft, early in the draft, if it's one or two of the really good ones. Outside of that, that's just feels more like a short term because you have pieces for long term success, but you just don't have one that, can immediately help you right now.
Yeah, and I think it would be wise for the Colts to not put all that pressure on Jalen Carlisle. Like I said, he's still learning the linebacker position. He didn't play this in college at all. So it would be a lot. Again, I like Jalen Carlisle. I think he can become a good player. But again, going back to I can't hand out these positions to these young players right away. They need to go out there and earn it. And as such, they need real competition in there, right? So if it is drafting a guy, cool. Like you just draft this guy, you let them compete for that position, fine. But if you're looking more of the short term, there are a few guys out there that would make some sense for the Colts to go after and not put the pressure on the rookie right away, like you've done, on the defensive side in the past. So, yeah, I would definitely say short term would probably be the most likely outcome. But, the Colts have drafted some good linebackers, so I would not be shocked in the slightest if they draft another one. All right, let's move on now to this secondary. So let's talk about first the cornerback position. And obviously, Derek, the Colts have just recently hired the defensive backs coach here. So let's talk about the cornerback position because when you look at it right now, Derek, of the guys that played last year at a substantial level, you only have two guys that are currently under contract that you believe can be in the immediate and also for the next couple of years, and Kenny Moore and Jalen Jones. You also have Samuel Womack. We don't know what's going to happen there. I thought he played pretty decently, so I wouldn't be opposed to bringing him back for some depth purposes. You do have Juju Brents, who, definitely has all the talent in the world, but can't stay healthy and has definitely been made of glass, honestly, which sucks in his first 2 years with the Indianapolis Colts. So when you're talking about cornerback, you have some young guys in here. You have a young guy in here in Jalen Jones. You have an older guy here in Kenny Moore. You have a couple young guys that, I wouldn't say necessarily you bank on as long-term guys. But when you're looking at the cornerback position specifically, Derek, how would you address this, either short-term or long-term?
Yeah, so the problem is like you have a lot of these young guys that could become like pretty decent players, but you're right. Like you don't have a lot of those bona fide, really good corner guys that can really make a difference. Like Kenny Moore is Kenny Moore. We know he can make a difference, but as good as Jalen Jones was this year at defended passes, it's obvious teams attacked him. Teams attacked him for a reason because a lot of times he's out of position. A lot of times he's aggressive, but he's not somebody that can cover every inch of dirt out there. He's just not the guy that is capable of doing that, especially if they're going verts. And he's had several issues with pass interferences because he typically is a lot more handsy than some guys, other guys are. And then, again, you don't have a third corner. You don't really have a bona fide true number 3 corner. Because like you said, Juju Brents is supposed to be cornerback 1. But he's missed 25 of his first, 34 games. Like how can we sit here and say that, we have confidence that this guy can do anything if he's never been available, So it's hard to do that. You have to try to find somebody right now that can come in and take over the position and be as good, if not better, than Jalen Jones. And again, Jalen Jones has been average to above average for much of his start of his NFL career. And I think you can find a decent corner out there on the market to be able to compete with that.
Again, and I don't know if you agree or disagree with this, but I think Jalen Jones would be much better served as a cornerback too. Like, I think if you can find a legitimate shutdown corner one, again, that's easier said than done. But if you can find a guy out there, a veteran guy that can come in and be that cornerback number one that always is lining up against that number one receiver, I mean, just imagine how much more Jalen Jones will thrive in that, not having to face that alpha every single week. I think that would help him out tremendously. I mean, to be fair to him, he's a 7th-round pick that's come in. I think, based off of where he's drafted and kind of all he's been put through, I think he has exceeded expectations. But again, Derek, I don't love him as cornerback one moving forward. I definitely think there needs to be a added proven veteran in here or multiple that come in and really help bring up the level of competition in this room. Because you have some young guys that I think you definitely need to add some legitimate short-term competition in this room. And heck, Derek, I wouldn't mind if you went both ways on this either, honestly. I just think you need to add some proven bodies first and then add some more potential talent in there as well. I think that would make a lot of sense there for the Colts. So definitely if we're going short versus long, definitely sticking with the short term here, free agency, or however you do it. Get some immediate impact guys in here in the cornerback position. And then to round it out, Derek, let's talk about the safety position. Similar to corner, you have a young guy in here in Nick Cross, who I thought, Derek, had his best year as a Colt. I mean, being that full-time guy, and crazy enough to say, we all had concerns about him, but I thought out of a lot of these DBs, he was one of the more consistent guys out there. Was he perfect? No, not by a long shot. He's definitely got to continue to get better. But the real question for a lot of us is that free safety position, Derek, because you have Julian Blackmon, who really had a bad year, definitely was fighting through injuries, so there is some grace there. But also, Derek, it feels like either he's been injured or he hasn't played at a high level. It's been one or the other just about every year, outside of maybe, 2 of his 5 years he's been with the Colts. So when you look at this, he's still fairly young, but there's an opportunity here, Derek, and I think this is where, out of all of the positions we've talked about, this is the one we're going to say both ways would make total sense for the Colts to go, because you have on one hand a guy like Javon Holland who's going to become available, a very proven free safety, and then again you have Malachi Starks sitting there, potentially going to be around where the Colts are drafting. So what are your thoughts here when it comes to the safety position, primarily free safety for the Indianapolis Colts?
Yeah, no doubt. Both of these, you can go both different ways here. And, it's assuming, whether or not you get Julian Blackmon back or not, you still want to try to find a long-term solution if you were to bring Julian Blackmon back, because, again, I don't know if Julian Blackmon is the future of this team or not. I don't even know if Nick Cross is or not. So you're really still trying to find that true safety that is going to be an absolute ball hawk in the backfield. We've talked about Malachi Starks. We've talked about a couple different safeties in this draft class that, could really do a lot of great things. And I mean, Cody, again, this was another thing last year. That's why I was so mad that the Indianapolis Colts did not attack the safety market the way they did, because the amount of safeties last year that you had the opportunity to take advantage of, and you chose to not do anything other than bring Julian Blackmon back on a 1-year deal, again, just frustrates me as a fan, because we kept saying it all offseason that there were 12 different guys out there that you could have been out there and said, these are guys that could instantly improve your defense. And Ballard just said no to all of them, and, just went back to Blackmon. So I hope that, the Indianapolis Colts take full advantage of, again, you're going to have a ton of safeties in the draft that are going to be available. Would not be opposed to doing that. And I also wouldn't be opposed to trying to find one in the free agent market either. So, you got to try to find what you can there.
And even if you did both ways, I mean, honestly, Derek, you find a guy that's going to be that starter at free safety, and then you add some competition in there because you really don't have a lot of competition in there. What do you have? Rodney Thomas, and I don't even know who else you could throw in there right now. There's not really any level of competition at free safety or any safety position for that matter. So I think the Colts definitely need to obviously find your starter at free safety. You got to find your ball hawk, but you also need to find some actual proven competition because, Derek, this is, again, going back to how the Colts just completely messed up a season ago with how they, thought about and approached the offseason. You cannot go out there assuming Nick Cross and whoever else you bring in is going to play all 17 games. You just can't do that. You cannot afford to do that as much as you want everybody to stay healthy every single time, every game, every play. That's just not a reality. So when and if that something does happen and somebody gets injured, has to miss a little bit of time, you need a guy that can go in there and play some legitimate football for you. You don't need to throw out Rodney Thomas again. You need to go out there and get a real legitimate guy in there that can come in and be that third safety. And you don't have that right now. You don't have that at all. So whether that's Julian Blackmon, okay, fine. Or whether that's somebody else, okay, fine. But I do think you need to address it in multiple ways, Derek, from a starter standpoint and also a backup standpoint. I think it would make a lot of sense there.
Yep, 100% agree with you there, man.
Awesome. Well, guys, let us know your thoughts here on the different positions, short-term and long-term. Would you like to see the Colts address certain positions in free agency? Which would you like to see them address in the draft more? Which ones would you like to say, hey, I'd like to see them address it in both ways? Let us know all those things in the comments section down below. But that'll do it for this one, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. We greatly appreciate it. And as always, guys, go Colts.